Okay, let's get started then. Welcome everyone to this launch event for Show Racism in the Red Card's Northwest office. My name is Lynn Collins and I'm the Regional Secretary of the TUC here in the Northwest, and I've been asked to facilitate today's launch event. So just some housekeeping to begin with. First of all, please can you all remain on mute throughout the event? So I think we have the power to mute you if you don't, but it just avoids any feedback and background noise for when our speakers and panelists are speaking. Just to let you know, we'll also be showing the event on our Facebook Live, and the event will be available later on the Show Racism in the Red Card YouTube channels. We'd also suggest that everyone, apart from our speakers and panelists, turns cameras off. That helps us ensure that we get a decent quality connection. And finally, we will be having a panel later, and we will be asking you to put any questions that you have for the panel into the chat facility. You can do that at any time during the presentation, and then we'll pick a fair sample of those, which I'll read out and put to the panel later on. And then finally, it should go without saying that as a charity that campaigns for equality and fairness, we won't tolerate any language or comments that go against those principles. I think it's always important to remind people of that when we have these events. So let's get started. This year, as you can see from the hoodie, is the 25th anniversary of the campaign. And although it's taken them 25 years, they finally realised that the Northwest is the epicentre of all things football and fairness, and they've decided to open an office here. I've been personally involved in the campaign for about 15 of those years in a number of trade union capacities, and I was really pleased in 2008 to be asked to join their Hall of Fame. Their work with schools is exceptional, and sadly even more important now perhaps than when they were founded. And events of recent weeks have reinforced the need for us to continue to challenge racism in football, but also in society. So let's begin by finding out a bit more about their work and the plans for the Northwest. So let's welcome Keziah Major, the new Northwest manager, to tell us more about their work and to show us a short film.
Hi everyone, it is so nice to be joined by you all. I am going to share my screen so you don't just have to look at my face, so hopefully there's something a bit more entertaining. As Lynn kindly introduced me, I am Keziah Major and I joined Show Racism the Red Card in November, so it's been a whirlwind couple of months. But even though I am new, obviously as a charity we are not, and we're entering our 25th anniversary, which is a really exciting time for us. And we are an educational charity aiming to combat racism through enabling role models who are predominantly but not exclusively footballers to help us present our anti-racist message through films, events, and as speakers alongside our skilled educational team. We work with lots of different people. We work with primary, secondary and sixth form students. We work with teachers, we work with adults in their workplaces, and we also have some union ambassador programs that I'll tell you more about. Now, it would be amiss to have this presentation without having a pause for context. I think it's really important to acknowledge that we've managed to expand as a charity and we've managed to open our Northwest base because of a wave of public donations following the murder of George Floyd and the subsequent Black Lives Matter movement across the UK. And we wouldn't be here now without that public support and the public acknowledgement that we need more anti-racist education. So the sorts of anti-racist education we offer are primary school programmes, so innovative, inspiring, interactive workshops, discussing questions such as what are stereotypes, what preconceived ideas do we have? Where do these ideas come from? What is racism? How can we respond to racism? And of course, all our programmes have been adapted to be delivered virtually at the moment, which is another challenge, but is one that we are achieving really, really well. But of course, when it is safe to do so, we're really excited to be back in schools. We have lots of different programmes that we offer. So one of the things that we can offer here in the Northwest is the creation of anti-racist captains in schools. So that would be working with a small group of students to really empower them to think about how they can really make a change in school that's got a much more longer lasting impact than just being a workshop participant, and really helping them to think about what campaigning work, what actions they can take. We also, of course, work with secondary schools. We've got a range of workshops available for them. It might include unconscious bias, racism, Islamophobia, homophobia, hate crime, anti-Semitism. And we also work with secondary schools on a carousel basis so that they can have more than one topic. And of course, we want to work with the school to make sure that our programmes really meet their needs, and they can be adapted for sixth form quite easily. We also run the largest schools competition in the UK on this subject, and we would encourage all schools to take part. This is a lovely photo here of Evie Fletcher, who was one of last year's winners from Stockport Academy here in Manchester, which was brilliant. And Stockport Academy have had winners, I think, 3 years running. So any other schools, you know, in the Northwest, encourage them to see if they can beat Stockport. We also offer teacher training, so whether that's twilight sessions, webinars, which we've got one coming up on the 11th of March with the NASWT. We've got an online e-course that teachers can work through at their own time. We offer whole day conferences, and we're also really excited to be working with the NASWT to develop a pilot teacher ambassador programme, which would see small groups of around 10 teachers attending a 6-week anti-racism programme to really look at what change they can see in their curriculum and in their school policies. Workplace-based training is something that has really grown this year, and we're really excited to have been approached and be working with lots of different workplaces and companies. And we can offer training that's a short kind of 90-minute introduction session to something much more in depth, looking at some of those topics that hopefully you can see there on the screen. And of course, these are all currently running via Zoom, which actually makes them much easier to run if you've got a workforce that's geographically spread. And something that I know I've been talking to Lynn about, as well as other people on this call, is our ambassador programme for unions, which are 6 to 10 weeks long, and really go into detail looking at what racism is, how do we recognise it, how do we respond, to start to think about unconscious bias and privilege, and of course to think about that critically in terms of ourselves as well as looking at things like legislation, the power of our voices, and how to be a good ally. So lots of things on offer on that ambassador course. It's also really important to us that we evaluate all our programmes using pre and post questionnaires. You know, we want to be able to confidently say that we have a marked impact on challenging racism, and our evaluations really support us in doing that. So if you do take part in any programme, please don't roll your eyes at being asked to fill in a form. It really helps us to prove that we are doing what we say that we're doing. So I'm going to stop now, and in a moment, Josh is going to share a little video with you. But just to reiterate, I'm Kesia Major. I'm based in Manchester. I'm here. I want to work with as many of you as possible, and I want to make the Northwest a really exciting place with lots of really positive anti-racist work going on. So with that being said, my email's on the screen if anyone wants to get in touch after, but obviously if people have got questions, as Lynn said, pop them in the chat box. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to let Josh share a little video just to tell you a little bit more.
The campaign has all 3 major football clubs on board, Newcastle, Middlesbrough and Sunderland, and young people are being encouraged to get involved too.
Well, I managed to bring Shaka Hislop and John Beresford back with me. Shaka, what was the main thrust of your message today?
If you are faced with problems of racial abuse, I think you need to talk to someone close. Both of you all decide what should be next step, and usually that is going to somebody in authority. Recently I was just opposite the ground filling up my car at petrol at a petrol station, and a group of about six young kids, couldn't be more than 10 or 12 years old, started shouting racial slurs at me, and then one recognising me shouted, "Hey, wait, that's Shaka Hislop," and they all come charging over for autographs.
Yeah, so that made all the difference.
Yeah.
You had these youths who were set in their ways and weren't able maybe to appreciate the harm that they were doing, and were so willing to dismiss it as otherwise.
I was involved in Youth Against Racism in Europe. We'd done an education pack, and we sent it out to people to endorse. And luckily, Shaka was on that list. He sent a letter back, which is still on the wall in my office, and a £50 cheque saying he wanted to get more involved. What you probably won't pick up on film is it was electric in the assembly, packed to the rafters. As many pupils and teachers actually as could get in the room.
One of our colleagues says something that's really interesting when asked a question, has racism gone away or is it getting better? And the answer is probably not. Racism changes its face all the time, but without the work of Show Racism the Red Card and anti-racism through education, racism would flourish.
A lot of people think that we tend to be a football charity, or that we're concentrating on getting rid of racism within football, and we're not. We utilise footballers and high-profile sports people in order to get the anti-racism message out. We're an educational charity.
We've stuck to that idea that you change attitudes through education, and that nobody's born a racist, and you can therefore educate people to be anti-racist, and that's the ethos on which Show Racism Red Card was established.
I think when we witness the change with our own eyes, it makes me feel like what we're really doing is doing a difference for the young people. If we can just give one or two young people in our sessions the confidence and the power to report a racist incident on themselves, or to look after someone and report someone else's racist incident, that really makes me feel like we're making a tangible difference.
Young people are like sponges, and they'll listen to what you say and they'll take it in and they'll think about it. And they're also extremely open. They will ask you anything. Adults need the training because they can be a little bit more closed-minded about certain things when they've already got that attitude, that is.
I didn't really twig the sheer numbers of young people that we would be educating and working with. I think the scale of what we were doing, I'd underestimated the scale of influence that we could potentially be having.
So it was right after the Paris attacks. My brother got beat up a lot just for having the second name Mohammed, and we talked to the head of year, who then was like, okay, we'll do an assembly. And I told them, I was like, they're not going to listen to you, like, no offence. Like, if they heard it from a pupil in school, maybe it'll open their eyes a bit more. They were really interested in getting me involved with them, and they thought I would, be a good person to kind of put out there for all the kids to be able to talk to.
Somebody who came in on our training and they did the whole session, and they were very, very good. At the end of the session, she came to us and she said, I particularly wanted to do this. She said, because I'm a teacher. 20 years ago, I received this workshop when I was in school, and it meant a lot to me. From Show Racism the Red Card, and when we went into a class with her kids, she kept talking about how, when I was your age, I did that. It showed the longevity of the organisation, and also I was massively impressed about how much she had remembered. So although she came on our training, she was actually very knowledgeable about the area of racism and prejudice, and that's because, as a kid, she went on one of our little workshops.
We've never had as much public support as we have today. Never had as many organisations come towards us wanting to work with us, and it's been an incredible year from that point of view. Over the course of 25 years, we've worked with millions of people throughout the world. That has come back really now to show massive support for us, and we've managed to harness that to grow the organisation in these difficult times.
I look back on the last 25 years and Show Racism the Red Card with a sense of paternal pride of how far we've come, how much good we've done, and recognising how much more we can do and will do in the years to come.
Fantastic. Brilliant. A real good summary there of the work of the organisation, and we're really, really pleased to welcome them to the Northwest this year. So on to our speakers now. Just a reminder, you can start to put your questions into the chat because I'll need time to go through those and get them ready for our panel later on. I'm going to be introducing the speakers and making sure they keep strictly to their time. I've got my own version of a red card here to wave if anybody goes over time. Shaka, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Lynn. If you allow me just a couple of moments for a little housekeeping of my own. My apologies, I don't have everybody on my screen, but I'd like to pay particular tribute to Viv Anderson and Alex Williams, two men and whose efforts in fighting against racism in their day set the foundations for me to live out my own boyhood dreams as a professional footballer. So off the top, thank you very much. Again, I'm not sure who else is on, but I'd also like to pay a special tribute to Trevor Sinclair, former teammate and still a very trusted friend of mine and a long-time supporter of us here at Show Recently Red Card, and proud Manchester boy. So at least we got that right, Lynn. Thank you very much. And I'll just going on the back of that video. First of all, I go from cringing at the sight of me some 25 years ago to being tear-filled and recognizing not just how far this program has come, but the people involved and the work that they continue to do in addressing the inequalities of society today. It really is inspiring in so many ways to see young people of all races step up to the challenge of today. A challenge that has been brought to the forefront, particularly over the last 20 years, over the last 12 to 15 months, given what we've witnessed on our screens, not just the murder of George Floyd, but the murder of Ahmaud Arbery, Christian Cooper having the police officers call on him, Breonna Taylor being murdered in her own bed. And it spoke to so many of the complaints of the Black community for so long. And now we saw it play out in real time. I think it also allowed us to see how thin the line was between that being them and it being us. And for me, it took an especially difficult toll. Just after the murder of George Floyd, I came downstairs to see my wife, having a discussion with our young son about his own role and responsibilities if he's out with his friends and if he's confronted or if he has to deal with law enforcement in any way. And as much as a father to Black children, you have to have that conversation at some time. You just never quite sure when is the right time. And you certainly don't think it's when they're 12 or 13 years old. But then you reflect, or I certainly took pause and reflected. Tamir Rice was 12 years old when he was shot outside a playground playing with a toy gun. Any one of my kids, any one of my 4 daughters could have been in place of Breonna Taylor. My wife is a real estate agent here in the US, and we travel with our kids and their activities, and in an effort to stay fit, we both go running. And my wife being involved in property, she would go into a house if it was under construction and have a look around. And you see how easily it could have been our stories and not Ahmaud Arbery. And that's tough. We started Show Recently Red Cards 25 years ago, and I felt that it was as a promise to deliver a better world to my kids. And then all of a sudden in 2020, I had to sit there and deal with the fact that I was failing on that promise. I didn't deliver that better world I set out to and promised my kids some 25 years ago. And it was on one of these calls that Leroy Rossinia, Vice President of Show Recently Red Card, came and said to me, Shaka, you're seeing this all wrong. This is a relay. We are running our leg. And we are now tasked with handing that baton off to the next generation to take it as far as they possibly can. We, though, have to hand that baton off in the best possible position. We have to give them the tools, the confidence to go on and run the best leg that they possibly can. We then have to sit back and hope that they can deliver on that same promise that we made 25 years ago. And if they don't, we also have to let them know that that was just their leg, and it's now their responsibility to hand off that baton to the generation to come. And that helped me deal a lot with the anxiety, the disappointment, and quite frankly, the depression that I started to feel early on in 2020. And our work has increased, and you've seen the public support to what we're doing. You've seen so many more raise up and extend their voices in support of an equality. An equality that's not just around Black lives, though Black lives was at the forefront during the course of 2020, but are recognizing that this ultimately is a human rights issue. Cliche I often use and I always seem to use is the rising tide lifts all boats. In 2020, that rising tide was Black lives, but the all boats that benefited were all human rights of those communities that feel marginalized, that go unheard. The rights of our women, of our LGBTQ community, of our asylum seekers, of our immigrants, of all those who feel they are overlooked by society today. Equality ultimately is our goal. And while Black lives and racism will continue to be at the front of so much we talk about, ultimately we want equality for all who feel marginalized. And that's what we'll continue to do. We continue to give a voice to the voiceless, continue to empower young people to have those conversations, be it with their teachers in the classrooms, or their mates on the playgrounds, or over the dinner table with their parents. Ask those questions about the inequalities and some of the actions that they witness and recognize as being wrong in their own lives. We have to empower our peers to have those conversations with each other when something isn't right, when we can no longer dismiss racist jokes or abuse as simple banter that we laugh off and walk away from. Those are our challenges today. And as Lynn pointed out, maybe it took us way too long in 25 years to have this presence in the Northeast. But on the one hand, I want to say nothing before its time, as my mother always reminded me. And then we couldn't pick a better time to be here in the Northwest, given what we're seeing around Raheem Sterling at Manchester City and Marcus Rashford at Manchester United, and so many other footballers of color as they deal with their challenges of today. I don't think we have had such strong, articulate, and timely advocates for racial equality and using the game, the diversity of the game, the popularity and power of the game, as we have now on both the red and blue sides of Manchester, going back some, and I'm hoping I don't date them here, some 30 years since Alex played for Manchester City and Viv for Manchester United. So I think it's, in a sense, we've come full circle in so many respects about who we are and this continued fight for equality and around the rights and abuse that Black footballers continue to face. I'll close by saying, and I know I'm coming to the end of my time, so to prevent me being the first of Lynn's red cards, I'd also just like to add that at times this work feels tiring. At times it's lonely, but continue to be buoyed, energized by the good that you do. And even if you aren't in a position right now to recognize that good. We started 25 years ago simply thinking that we were affecting our own communities in the Northeast. We didn't expect any more. Yet 25 years later, here we are talking about a national campaign and not just the British, but we recently launched in South Africa, the global good that we continue to do. That's due in a large part to you, those who volunteered their time over the years, those who continue to volunteer their time and do this work today. Know that you have a community here around you in supporting you. And in 25 years' time, you get to sit back, look on at all the good that you're doing today, reminisce, cringe at those videos, but you'll be applauded for your efforts. Thank you very much.
Shaka, thanks very much for that. That was really fantastic. And thank you for 25 years of commitment to this campaign, because you never fail to step up to the mark when the campaign calls you to. And it's really important that we've got brilliant ambassadors like you. Our next speaker, and Andy, you've got 5 minutes, is Andy Burnham, Mayor of Greater Manchester. Andy was elected to this position in 2017 and was previously an MP for Lee, and was Culture Secretary in the last Labour government with an oversight for sport. And I understand Andy supports a small local team here in the Northwest. So over to you, Andy.
Well, thank you, Lynn. You've teed me up there because it's a good week to talk football in the Northwest. City won, United won, Everton won, and I'll leave the mayor of the Liverpool City region to complete the run of results there. But it's fantastic to join you, Shaka. You know, you talk about carrying the baton. My God, you've carried that baton with great dignity. But also to have Viv on the call, Trevor, the great Alec Williams. It's fantastic to be on this call, and just to see Rachel Brown-Finnis as well from the women's game. I mean, this campaign means a huge amount to me, Lynn. I first came in contact with Show Racism the Red Card 23 years ago, when it was 2 years old, when I was writing a report for the Football Task Force on racism in football. And I remember Shaka being involved with the campaign then, I think in goal for West Ham at the time, if I remember rightly. But I kind of got to know Jed Greby and the team at that time. And the fact that Jed is still kind of doing what, and he needs a shout out from me today, the great Jed Greby. He's been fantastic what he's done in building this campaign. I remember being at Goodison once, and bear in mind, Everton has had its problems with racism. The first time I ever saw racism in my life was when I was 11 years old, watching Alex Williams come to the goal at the Gladys Street, and I've told him about that before he knows that. But that was the first time I saw racism and heard it with my own eyes, and it had a huge impact on me. I years later saw Show Racism Red Card have an event at Goodison with black players, and seeing kids from all backgrounds in the city just sitting there, hanging on every single word. I think this organisation has got through to the next generation in a way that others haven't, and that's the power of Show Racism the Red Card. And Lynn, the trade unions have always supported it, and well done to you. Shaka just mentioned Marcus and the kind of reality that, you know, we make progress, but then we take some backward steps, don't we? And that's been this story. But please don't forget the progress that we've made. We've come a long, long way from Goodison Park in 1980. If I go back to the time when I was writing the task force report, we'd only just seen the demise of chanting at matches. I can remember racist chanting at Goodison Park, which is almost it was almost unheard of now. So we've made some progress. And then the task force actually called for the ban on individual comments on at matches, and that was put into effect. But I think what's shown with the problems Raheem has faced and Marcus more recently is, you know, racism finds a new place, doesn't it? And it has found one on social media. And I just think, you know, the next frontier here is in saying there has to be accountability, doesn't there, in society? And I believe with all those who are saying that we need to see the social media companies ensure that people have IDs behind accounts so that action can be taken. It can't be right that footballers today can face anonymous abuse of that kind and racist abuse of that kind. And I think we should be clear in saying that's the next frontier in the campaign to eradicate racism from not just football, from society as a whole. I think we have come forward, but you know, Shaka was just kind of mentioning what we saw last year, where we saw two pandemics come together, not just COVID-19, but the pandemic of racism and hate that's been growing around the world over the last decade. And, you know, we've all seen that and we've all felt that. And of course, last summer, I think made us ask some tough questions about where do we go from here. In some ways, I'm a strong supporter of players taking the knee, and it acquires a new relevance, doesn't it, when you see what's happened to Marcus in recent days. Absolutely, show racism the red card, and we all kind of support those actions. But I think what happened last year makes us go deeper and question more and say, are we really doing enough? And I think in Greater Manchester, we've been going through that debate. I don't think we are doing enough, if we're honest, to challenge the structural and systemic racism that we find. The fact that the Black community is massively underrepresented in Greater Manchester life in so many ways at the moment, that kids from the community and other communities in Greater Manchester still don't get the same opportunities. So we took a decision to establish a race equality panel at the Greater Manchester level. We've committed to publishing a race equality and policing report, which the panel are looking at the first draft of now. I think we need to go deeper now, don't we, and ask bigger questions about why have we not made the progress that we should have made? Why do we still see racism directed at players? But more than that, why do we still see structural discrimination within our society? And we have to have open discussions about all of those things. But I say that, Lynn, in a spirit of recognising the progress that's been made, because great progress has been made. You've all carried the baton with class, as far as I'm concerned. This organisation will always have my full support, and we keep on moving forward together towards a society hopefully free from hate, racism of any kind, where the innate equality of every single human being is recognised in all that we do. And I will look back to the role that Alex, that Viv, Shaka, and Trevor and others have played in changing our game, but in doing so, helping change society. We've come a long way, but we've got further to go. And I'll be with you, and we'll be with you all of the way. So thank you, Lynn, and back to you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Andy, for that. And that nicely segues us into our next speaker, which is Liz Cameron. Liz is a union activist. She's an anti-racist campaigner, and she's most recently been elected as the chair of the Greater Manchester Race Equality Panel that Andy's just mentioned. So I'm delighted to give 5 minutes to Liz. Over to you. I think you're on mute, Liz.
I know very well you're stressing the 5 minutes there on purpose for me, Lynn. But as you know, I'm very used to the buzzer going off after 3, so I have my discipline. So look, it's absolutely wonderful to be here. Show Racism the Red Card is my home. It's my brother, my sister, my family. This is family to me. The work that they do is just second to none. As an educational charity, I believe they're far and away above so much of the work that is happening on the ground, because they are taking, as somebody who's got the background of working in youth work, I've been in children's services for over 20 years, in youth services for well over the last sort of 10, 12, 15. And it's about working with people from where they're at and building from that point. We can't disguise the fact that racism goes on in our society, but when we do that work with children and young people, whilst we don't accept racism, we've got to take people's isms as they are and then educate them as to why they hurt and the damage that they do and the impact they have on people. At that, I've just got to pay testimony to a fabulous quote that was in the chat, which is, "It is being allowed to feel free in the skin that coats our bodies." Thank you for that, Lisa. It's nice to be able to quote a young person as something that's coming in our current chat rather than your Maya Angelou's, because you really know what's going on for us. So I've been a long time speaker for Show Racism the Red Card through my work in the trade union movement, which has gone well over 25 years. as I say, you know, as somebody who's worked in youth work and also as just a Black person, I've seen how racism impacts our lives, and have defended a lot of people who have racism happen to them in the workplace, discrimination, overt and covert, you know, so those things that we now call microaggressions didn't used to have that name. It used to be very hard, and still is, to prove racism actually takes place in the workplace. And this is why trade unions really do try and get behind that agenda. Having said that, in my activist role, I am very much the critical friend to our trade unions, spurring them to do more, be more, and deliver more for Black workers, because we still continue to have a very disproportionately negative experience in the workplace. And that's everything from poor work contracts to not being ignored for development in the workplace, not getting training, not getting higher level jobs. So all of this does interconnect because it comes from somewhere. So these views go both ways, if you will. So when we start talking about the education of young people, we have that opportunity to start to educate families, to get in there, to have the younger child talk to their parent and challenge some of the statements that they will make. So these are the things that I find are very powerful about their work. But I have to shelve that here because that's not why I'm here today. But it is important to tell you that I've got that background. And so when I see comments that talk from Remy, again in the chat, that talk about the over-policing, the idea of policing in schools, and we know about racial profiling that goes on with young Black men. It's an absolute disgrace. The disproportionate level of aggressive treatment that they will get. But you know, in our role in the GMCA Race Equality Panel, we have had reports from the police. We take those reports, we are holding people to account, if you will, and people are having to stand by the figures that they really don't want to report. Saddening figures, horrifying figures in some instances, because these are people we know. I know people who are serving prison terms for not having been involved in a crime because of joint enterprise. So we know how racism really can impact us. We would talk about disproportionate judicial treatment, you know, treatment in the judiciary. And I would give tribute to Debbie Mackey here, the deceased Debbie Mackey, who fought so hard for Yusuf Mackey, her son, who she felt was very unjustly, you know, that if you like, the people who murdered him were very unjustly punished by the judicial system, and it was felt that that had a racist aspect to it. So we will look at all those things. We will look, oh, she's telling me I've got to get off. I hate her. No, I don't. I love her really. But look, it's important to say that what we do is interconnect with the other committees. It's important to say that we're interconnecting with health, social care, policing, education, health, employment. We're not hiding away from anything. They are reporting to us. We are scrutinizing them. You've heard me today. You've got a chair who's going to fight for it all the way. Trust me, you'll be hearing from me. Thank you very much for having me here today.
Brilliant, Liz, and really great to hear that you were elected chair. Congratulations from all of us in the trade union movement, and we'll be, I know we will be hearing from you, but would encourage everyone to look at the work of the Race Equality Panel and find out how you can get involved. Our final speaker before we move to the panel is Steve Rotherham, and Steve is the Liverpool City Region Mayor. Like Andy, he was elected in 2017, having previously been the MP for Liverpool Walton. So straight over to you, Steve.
Thanks, Lynn, and thanks, Kezia and the Show Races and Red Card team for launching in the Northwest. And I'm also here, like you, as a long-standing supporter of the great work that they do. In fact, when I was elected as the MP for Liverpool Walton, it was the first organisation that I joined when I went down to Westminster. And I think Jed will attest to the fact that I enthusiastically backed all of the campaigns while I was down there, and seem to remember hosting a few parliamentary receptions myself. And I've continued that support as the Metro Mayor, including several charity football matches for Show Races and Red Card. even if that did mean that I had to man-mark Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank for 90 minutes in the charity match at Stamford Bridge a couple of years ago. And I'm told that he still has sleepless nights thinking about a near 60-year-old man marking him out the game. Although I have to say he did score a hat-trick of offside goals. And if we had had VAR, that wouldn't have stood. I'm over it now, obviously. But look, just as it can be argued that things seem to be going well in that game for us before we let our guard down and we were punished for it, the work to eradicate racism can't be taken for granted either, and we can't let our collective guard down. And just when you think that messages like those from Black Lives Matter and that their campaign are getting through, then racism once again raises its ugly head with the vile recent attacks on a number of professional footballers. So tackling systemic racism in our society has never been more important, and it's come to the public fore, and I think it's rightly here to stay. So what are we doing? Myself and the organisation that I lead saw last year as a turning point, a moment of reflection, of course, but also a moment to accelerate the proposals that we'd had towards a more equal, progressive and socially just society. And that means tackling racism. So we're redoubling our efforts and taking action in a whole host of areas, whether that be reviewing our own employment practices so that we can encourage others to improve as well. You know, providing specific and ring-fence support for Black, Asian and minority ethnic businesses and community projects, expanding our education and employment opportunities, increasing BAME representation in our labour market, and of course supporting organisations established to tackle racism. And we too have set up our race equality panel. And I think all of this is in part thanks to Show Racism the Red Card, that continues to highlight racism but uses football as the hook to educate people. And that's what we need to do more of. We need to ensure that our young people certainly understand about the racist nature of many of the things that they see online. So thanks for the invite again. You know, you always have and always will have had my unequivocal support, and that will continue. And it's great to see the progress that Show Racism the Red Card has made over the last quarter of a century and continues to make. Thanks, Lynn.
Brilliant. Thanks, Steve, for that. And I know you may well be staying around for the next section where we're going to put some questions to our panel. Hopefully, if I manage to multitask and be able to read them out and put them to the panel. So I'm going to start by just giving some very quick introductions to our 4 panel members. Firstly, we've got Viv Anderson. He was the first Black player to represent England at international level. He was Sir Alex's first signing as Manchester United manager, and who brought him in from Arsenal to join the Red Devils. We've got Alec Williams, former England goalie, who spent the majority of his career at Manchester City with a brief spell at Port Vale. And since retiring from football, he's firstly worked for Port Vale's Community Foundation before heading back to Manchester City to support their community programmes. Trevor Sinclair is joining us, who started his career in sunny Blackpool before playing for both QPR and West Ham. He then made the move back to Manchester, joining Manchester City. Trevor got 12 England caps during his playing career. And Rachel Brown-Finnis is joining us as well. Rachel made her England debut for the women's national team, playing in goal in 1997 and won over 80 caps. She played on both the blue and the red sides of Merseyside. And Rachel also represented Great Britain in the 2012 Olympics. That's the easy bit. The bit now is where I have to kind of find questions to ask you. And I'm going to start with the kind of first question, which was quite a lengthy one that's put in there. But even as the many cases in the last week have been condemned by the media, these kind of anti-racism cases, the question is really asking about social media and the impact of social media. We've seen it not just in football, but in other sports, including cricket, and the government's considering larger fines. Do you agree that anyone who wants to open an account on social media should give their real name and where they live, and that social media companies should be fined, and the fine should start at 100,000? So shall I go to Viv first on that one? Any thoughts on that?
I agree with everything you've just said there. Yeah, it's like the associations around the world when racism happens, the fines are bordering on ridiculous. You know, less than a week's wages to some of the players. So I agree, it should be stringent tests to make sure they adhere to the rules, and if they break the rules, they should be fined accordingly. And I think you find them in the pocket, and that's where it hurts most people. So if you start at £100,000 and go from there, I'm all in agreement.
Brilliant, thanks, Viv. Alex, have you got any comments on social media and the impact of the negative impact of it? What we can do about that?
Yeah, I think I agree with Viv a little bit, but there needs to be some education because people can get round systems. And I think, there's so many ways now people can racially abuse people. When Viv and myself played in the early days, we never had social media, so it was great. The only stick we got was from the person who was in the stand. But totally agree, you've got to look to sort of come up with something which will make them stop, but also education's got to be part of it. Otherwise, they'll find ways around the fines and, putting the correct names down, etc., etc.
Rachel, anything from your perspective? Because particularly women as well face the double whammy sometimes on social media. Any comments from you?
Yeah, I'd agree that I think accountability for the huge multi-billion-pound firms that run these social media platforms are never held accountable at all for anything that's posted on there. So first and foremost, it has to be looked at each of the individual platforms has to do more to prevent this almost trend. It is kind of an easy opportunity for anyone who wants to post something ridiculous or post something of a very right or left-wing opinion, they can just do that. And that, for me, is not good enough.
Great. I think we've got a little bit of feedback coming in there, but we could hear you, Rachel. We could hear everything you said. Trevor, over to you.
I think it just shows how important the work that Show Racism Red Card is doing. And I have to say, I'm very proud of my former teammate, Shaka Hislop, starting this up 25 years ago. I've been involved with the charity for about 20 years. And I think it just highlights how important a charity like this is to go into schools, educate young people, and hopefully for the next generation, my kids, our kids and their kids, things will start to get better. But I do agree, the social media sites, the government need to take authority on this, and there can't be anonymity for just throwing racism around on social media, and that needs to be handled.
Brilliant, thanks for that. There's a number of questions about collaborations in the game between different anti-racist charities, but particularly a question about whether you think the FA and the Premier League could be doing more. Now, we've seen them do some things this season and introduce some things, but what do you think? Do you think they could be doing more? And do you think there's room for collaboration with things like Kick It Out and some of the other campaigns? Shall I start with you, Alex, on that one?
Sorry, just unmuting myself. Yeah, I think there is a lot going on at the moment, and I think there's a lot of silo work going on. Individually, all the groups are doing great work. I personally don't know to what extent the powers that be, the FA, Premier League, PFA, are speaking to each other, and probably Jed, who I think is on the call, might be a better place to answer that one than all of us. But there does need to be some sort of strategic direction, which I'm sure is happening, but they all need to work towards the perfect scenario where we can try and eradicate this and have, more importantly, milestones along the way which can be measured. Otherwise, we'll be here in another 25 years having the same conversation.
Viv, do you want to come in on that one?
I think when we and myself and Alex started all those years ago, we never had a voice. We could never speak up because we wouldn't make footballers. So that's what we desperately wanted to be. So now, moving forward, 2021, you've got Marcus, you've got Raheem, who have voices. We never had a voice. If we went to the authorities and said, well, somebody's racially abusing me, we'd be dismissed. Now they have a voice. And I think they're doing absolutely fantastic with the voice they've got. And I think the more people like them get involved, the better it's going to be for the future.
Great, thanks for that. Let's move on to another question. Somebody's made the comment, does anyone know if there are any female footballers as part of the campaign? Well, we've got Rachel here today, and I know that we've got lots of women working in the campaign as well. Rachel, how important do you think it is that the campaign uses women football role models as well as men?
Well, I think obviously the primary focus of the charity is to try and educate people about racism, but racism comes under one of many prejudices that people face in this society, and in a lot of ways it has a lot of parallels. And at the moment, with women's football having more profile than it's ever done, then hopefully we could be part of those role models to help educate people about the diversity, not just of the sport. In fact, it's been really interesting day to day, because I've been doing an inclusion and diversity training day as part of the company BT that I work for, which has been really kind of informative and inspirational. And the quote that stood with me is that diversity is a reality. We have a diverse community, but inclusion is a choice. And that was really kind of a powerful strand, that being a woman, people of colour, all the different minority groups that may suffer prejudice, we all have a duty to challenge that and to make inclusion part of what we choose to do.
Great. Anyone else want to comment on the importance of getting the women in the game involved in the campaign? Who haven't we come to? Trevor?
Yeah, well, to be honest, I've got a football academy, which is an educational academy, and we obviously promote anti-racism and equality. And sometimes being on the ground or on the pitch amongst these young people, and you hear certain comments, that's a great opportunity to educate on what can be said and what can't be said and what's accepted in front of women, especially in our game, the football game. But all in all, I just feel inclusion. You're talking about diversity. We are a diverse society. And I think the better we can have inclusion, I think that will enrich our civilization, as in this country. But again, I always come back to Show Racism Red Card. I think it's going into the schools, having workshops, educating young people about we're all the same. We talk about races, we talk about colour, we talk about gender, sexuality. Listen, we're all human race. We're all part of the human race. So start acting like a proper civilization, and let's evolve together.
Brilliant. I mean, we picked up earlier in the conversation the role that some of the younger players have got now as role models in the game. What can we do to support those players who are taking a stand now and speaking out? We've got, I don't know how many people on this call, and we've got lots of people watching this on Facebook and on the YouTube channels. What can we all do to support the stand that players are making? Maybe come to Alex first on that.
Yeah, we did something really interesting this year at Man City. 2 months ago, it was Black History Month, and we got all our scholars involved in coming together with a timeline of all the black players who play for Manchester City. They all then had to individually research that player and linked it to a local primary school. So we were helping them in that way, but also there's different avenues now, player liaison people who young players can go and speak to. And when you've got someone like Raheem Sterling, who's seen as almost our own player ambassador for racism, it's great for the young people to go and speak to him.
Viv, what can we do to support younger players coming into the game now?
I've been to many schools over the years where they've done projects on me, because obviously being the first player, and then when I turn up is a big surprise to everybody. So I think the education side is really, really important. I learned something just in the lockdown. A lad called Jack Leslie was a footballer, played for Plymouth Argyle. Never heard of him before, but he would have been the first black player to play for England. He was called up for England. When they found out he was black, they took him off the list and he never played. And I never knew this, so Fatton 64 never knew this. So I think the education of black history is really important. People should know things like that. People like me didn't know anything about Jack Leslie up to 4 or 5 months ago, which is a sad indictment. So I think education of youngsters is really, really important.
Rachel, over to you.
I'd agree absolutely with Viv about education of youngsters is absolutely key, but as well, and I know Show Racism and the Red Card, this has been one of the newer projects, is educating adults, because we know, not necessarily a personal statement, but people of my generation, we weren't necessarily given that education when we were growing up, and we all know about unconscious bias and how our views have been formed over the years. You're never too old to kind of program your brain based on new experiences, and reading and learning through other people's experiences, I think, can be hugely, hugely powerful. That's certainly a continuing pledge that I've made to myself, to become a better person, to understand, or try and understand through educating myself, so that I can better educate other people.
Great. And final word to you, Trevor.
Yeah, I think this is why it's important to me that we have different charities. Obviously, Show Racism and the Red Card. I think the work they do in the schools with workshops and the educational workshops they do, I think that's really important. But kick it out, go to different corners of our society. And I think that's why it's important that we do have different charities that support anti-racism and obviously inclusion and equality with our society. So the more people that we can get to meet, the more people that we can educate, whether it's kids in schools or whether it's going into the length and breadth of the country to places where they don't tend to get a lot of Black people and interaction with Black and Asian communities. I feel both charities can work alongside in tandem, but still also do a lot of good in educating people throughout this country.
Great. And it kind of brings us back to Shaka's relay race, doesn't it, that he talked about earlier. We've got that baton at the moment, and we need to make sure that we all pass it on. Well, look, that's all we've got time for. So I want to finish by thanking all of our speakers and our panelists for making time to join us today. And thanks to everyone who's joined us at the launch event. If you want to find out more about the campaign, you can visit the Show Racism and the Red Card website, where you can also make a Just Giving donation, maybe as your ticket fee for coming along and supporting the launch today. You can also purchase some of their fantastic merchandise as modelled by myself and Trevor there, including these new hoodies just for their 25th birthday. And for any trade union reps who are on the call, look out for information about the Ambassadors Programme that Keziah talked about, that we'll be launching here in the Northwest in the next month or two. And finally, a really big special thank you to Keziah for arranging this event, and a really big welcome to Show Racism and the Red Card into the Northwest. We really look forward to working with you in the role, and everyone on this call is committed to giving you as much support as we can to make the campaign here a success. So thanks for joining us, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.